The sound of the key scratching against the lock was frantic. It was the sound of a man who owned the world, or at least thought he did. Outside, the rain was drenching Adrian's expensive linen suit, the one he'd bought specifically for his business trip to Scottsdale. Inside, Lena stood in the darkened foyer, a glass of vintage Merlot in her hand, watching the security monitor. Adrian, muffled, shouting, "Lena, open the damn door! The lock is sticking again! Lena!" Lena didn't move. She watched his face on the screen, red, bloated with ego, and still carrying the faint tan of a desert sun she hadn't been invited to see. For 10 years, that voice had dictated the temperature of the room, the color of the curtains, and the very limits of her own identity. Lena, internal monologue. "Go ahead, Adrian. Turn it harder. That lock doesn't recognize you anymore. Neither do I." Just 3 days ago, Adrian had stood in this very hallway, adjusting his tie. He'd looked at Lena, not in the eyes, but at her apron, and said, "Try not to spend too much while I'm gone, Lena. Remember, I'm the one out there building this empire brick by brick. You're just the one living in it." He thought he was the architect. He forgot that every empire needs a foundation, and he'd been building his on a floor Lena had been quietly polishing until it was slick enough to make him slide. Adrian, shouting, "I know you're in there. This is my house. I paid for every square inch of this property." Lena took a slow sip of her wine. He was right. He had paid for the bricks, but he'd been so busy building that he never noticed when the deed changed hands. He never noticed the quiet conversations with the bank, or the way the household expenses had actually been a slow, methodical liquidation of his arrogance. This isn't just a story about a cheating husband. This is a masterclass in why you should never underestimate the woman who knows where all the bodies are buried. Because she's probably the one who dug the holes. Before we see the look on Adrian's face when he realizes he's a guest in his own life. If you believe that silence isn't weakness, but strategy, subscribing helps us keep bringing these stories of justice to life for you. Have you ever been told that you contribute nothing to a relationship while you were doing all the heavy lifting? Tell me your story in the comments. I'm reading them. To understand how Lena ended up with a glass of wine and a deactivated keycard, you have to understand the slow erosion of the last decade. Adrian didn't become a monster overnight. It was a gradual build, 1,000 tiny cuts to Lena's confidence. In the early years, Lena was a partner. She managed the books for Adrian's construction firm, handled the contractors, and organized the permits. But as the bank account grew, Adrian's memory shrank. By year 5, he started interrupting her at dinner parties. Adrian, flashback dialogue. "Honey, let the men talk. You've got the dates wrong anyway. Why don't you go check on the dessert?" Lena would smile, her face a mask of perfect composure, while her heart hammered against her ribs. She learned early that questioning him invited the freeze. Adrian wouldn't hit her. He would simply erase her. He'd stop speaking to her for days, looking right through her as if she were a piece of furniture he'd grown tired of. She discovered that silence kept the peace. But curiosity invited punishment. Lena, internal monologue. "I became a ghost in my own hallways. I learned to walk softly, to speak only when spoken to, and to keep my observations to myself. I was waiting. I just didn't know what I was waiting for." The what arrived 6 months ago in the form of a hidden folder on Adrian's cloud drive. He'd left his tablet open on the nightstand, an uncharacteristic slip-up fueled by the arrogance of thinking Lena was too technologically challenged to look. The folder wasn't labeled Affairs or Secret Life. It was labeled Project Phoenix. Inside, Lena didn't just find evidence of another woman. She found a calculated legal assassination of her future. There were drafts of a divorce filing, spreadsheets of separate property claims, and a strategy to prove the house was bought with an inheritance Adrian had received before the marriage. He was planning to kick her out. Not just leave her, but leave her with nothing. He was going to claim she was a dependent who contributed zero to the growth of his assets. He was even planning to charge her back rent against her portion of their meager savings. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, the blue light of the tablet reflecting in her eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. For the first time in 10 years, the mask didn't just feel like protection, it felt like a weapon. If Adrian wanted to play a game of self-made man, she was going to let him. She was going to be the most submissive, grateful, and stupid wife he'd ever seen. She would be so quiet. He wouldn't even hear the ground shifting beneath his feet. Worst-case scenario escalation. Lena realized that if she confronted him now, he'd hide the rest of the money. She had to stay. She had to sleep next to a man who was planning her ruin, and she had to do it with a smile. Do you think it's possible to truly love someone once you've seen proof that they intend to destroy you? Or does love die instantly? Let's talk about that transition in the comments. The morning Adrian left for his business trip, he was whistling. It was a cheerful, jarring sound that echoed through the marble foyer. He kissed Lena on the cheek, a dry, rehearsed gesture, and handed her a list of chores. Adrian, I'll be back in 10 days. Make sure the pool guy actually cleans the filters this time. And don't touch the mail in my office, Lena. It's sensitive business material. You wouldn't understand it anyway. Lena watched him pull away in his silver Porsche, his reflection in the rearview mirror already looking toward the horizon. The moment his taillights faded, the subservient wife disappeared. She went straight to his office. She didn't need to break in. She had been the one who organized his files for years, even if he'd forgotten. She found the courier documents he'd tried to hide. It wasn't a business contract. It was a luxury resort itinerary in Scottsdale. 2 tickets, one in his name, and one in the name of a woman named Maya. But Lena wasn't looking for Maya. She was looking for the original deed. Years ago, when they bought this house, Adrian was in the middle of a lawsuit and didn't want the asset in his name. He had used a small trust fund Lena's grandmother had left her as the down payment, intending to refinance her out of the title later. He thought he had successfully scrubbed her name during a flurry of paperwork 3 years ago. But Adrian's arrogance was his blind spot. He had managed the equity, but he'd never legally dissolved the life estate clause Lena's grandmother's lawyer had baked into the original trust. He spent 3 years trying to build a cage for me. He never realized the door was never actually locked. He just assumed I was too afraid to push it open. The stakes were higher than ever. If Lena made a mistake now, Adrian would realize he was being outmaneuvered and would shut down the accounts. She had 240 hours. That night, she didn't cry into a pillow. She sat at the dining table with a highlighter and a legal pad. She called an old contact, a shark of an estate attorney who owed her father a favor. Lena, on phone. He's in Arizona. He thinks he's spending his money on a vacation. I want to make sure that by the time he lands back in this city, he doesn't own the chair he's sitting in. As Lena worked through the night, her phone buzzed. It was an accidental pocket dial from Adrian. For 30 seconds, she listened to the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and Adrian's voice clear as a bell. She's too stupid to notice, Maya. She thinks she's lucky just to live in my shadow. Lena hung up. She didn't feel hurt. She felt precise. What would you do if you heard your partner calling you stupid to their mistress? Would you lose your temper, or would you use that anger to fuel your exit plan? Tuesday afternoon. The sun was setting, casting long, skeletal shadows across the driveway as Adrian's Porsche pulled up. He wasn't alone. Maya was in the passenger seat, touching up her lipstick, looking at the mansion as if she already owned the keys. Adrian hopped out, chest puffed out, radiating the energy of a conqueror returning from war. He strode to the front door, still talking over his shoulder. Adrian, wait until you see the foyer, babe. I designed the layout myself. It's all about scale and dominance. He slid his key into the deadbolt. He turned it. It didn't budge. He frowned, jiggling the handle. He tried again, putting his shoulder into it. Nothing. Adrian, Lena, open the door. The lock is jammed. The door didn't open. Instead, the smart lock speaker crackled to life. It wasn't Lena's voice. It was a recorded message from a security firm. Security voice. Unauthorized entry detected. This property is under the management of the Hawthorne Irrevocable Trust. Please vacate the premises immediately. Adrian froze. His face went from tan to a sickly, pale gray. Behind him, Maya stepped out of the car, looking confused. Adrian, what's going on? I thought you said this was your house. At that moment, the door opened, just 6 inches, held by a heavy security chain. Lena stood there, dressed in a sharp black suit Adrian had never seen. She didn't look like a mouse. She looked like a judge. Lena, you're home early, Adrian, but I'm afraid there's been a change in the business material you thought I wouldn't understand. She slid a single envelope through the gap. Inside was a copy of the new deed and a formal notice to vacate. Lena, the trust has decided you are no longer a fit tenant. Your things, at least the things you actually paid for, are in the storage unit on 4th Street. I've already sent the address to your phone. Adrian, stammering. You can't do this. I built this. I am the architect. Lena. No, Adrian. You were just the one who picked the paint colors. I'm the one who owned the land. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, Project Phoenix has officially burned to the ground. Lena closed the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the loudest thing Adrian had ever heard. He stood on the porch, his business associate watching him in silence, as the automatic sprinklers hissed to life, drenching his expensive suit one last time. Adrian didn't just lose a house. Because the trust transfer triggered a default on his secret loans, his creditors were already circling his firm. He had tried to leave Lena with nothing, but in his arrogance, he had left himself with no foundation to stand on. Lena chose a calculated, quiet victory over a loud, messy scene. If you think she handled this perfectly, hit the like button. And tell me, if you were Lena, would you have let him in one last time just to see his face? Or is the locked door the ultimate revenge?